the day I graduated from college. After a disastrous, self-destructive confession to the guy I'd had a crush on for 4 years, I vanished from his world. 3 years later, we met again when my father brought him home to choose a bride, or groom, for an arranged marriage. Him. I'll take him. Larry Smith's lazy gaze landed on me, sitting in my wheelchair. My dad should have been the one presenting his children on a silver platter after all. We were the ones begging for a favor. But the Smith group had, against all odds, accepted my father's fawning suggestion. Why don't you come and pick one out yourself? And so, on this first snowy morning of winter, my stepbrother was busy choosing the perfect outfit in his walk-in closet. My stepsister was in her own vanity room, meticulously applying a flawless face of makeup. I was bored out of my mind, parked by the window in my wheelchair, just staring into space. They bustled past me, one after another, each throwing me a look of disgust, some subtle, some not. They all thought I was in the way. The person coming to our house today was the eldest son of the Smith group. About 6 months ago, my dad's business started going downhill. He struggled for a long time, but nothing helped. The whole company was on the verge of collapse. Just then, after pulling every string he could, he finally made a connection with the Smith group. But the connection wasn't much use. They didn't need anything from us, we had nothing to offer. And we weren't friends or family, so we couldn't cash in on any goodwill. At his wit's end, my father made a Hail Mary play and floated the idea of a strategic marriage. To his shock, they actually agreed. I wouldn't dare to presume, I heard my dad say on the phone in his study one day. I have no idea which of my children might appeal to Mr. Smith. Or, if it's not an imposition, perhaps Mr. Smith could visit our home for a simple meal when he has a moment, and then decide. He was just saying it to be polite. Everyone knew that while they called it a marriage, we were really just sending someone over to the Smith family as a plaything. There would be no real marital bond. But unexpectedly, the young Mr. Smith on the other end of the line accepted the invitation. Mark, my stepsister, Hannah, said after finishing her makeup, calling over to the walk-in closet. It's not like he's even guaranteed to be into guys. You can stop trying so hard. Mark heard the mockery in her voice but didn't get angry. He just kept holding up different outfits to his body. We'll see who's trying too hard. They both scoffed, then turned to look at me in unison. You should probably stay out of sight later. I pulled my gaze away from the window. Okay. I'd only been back in my room for a little while when a commotion outside told me the Smiths had arrived. Soon, the noise quieted down a bit. With my door closed, I couldn't hear what they were saying. Leo, our housekeeper, Mrs. Johnston, said a moment later, pushing the door open with a plate in her hands. Come have some strawberries. Mrs. Johnston had originally come to our family with my mother. When my mom passed away, she could have left, but she looked at me and decided to stay. Thanks, Mrs. Johnston. Are they all here? I asked, popping a strawberry into my mouth. Yes. Mrs. Johnston nodded. That young Mr. Smith doesn't look like a pushover. He only said a word or two after coming in, and he looked absolutely grim. Definitely not an easy person to get along with. It's better that you're not out there, Leo. It's fine. I shook my head. The way I am, it's true that you are wonderful, Mrs. Johnston cut me off. And your legs will get better. I opened my mouth, but not wanting to disappoint her, I just went along with it. Yeah, they'll get better. We'd barely spoken for a minute, and I was just telling her about a soup she could make me for dinner, when Hannah pushed the door open. Dad wants you to come out. Me? I was surprised. Yeah. Hannah didn't look happy. She delivered the message and left. Mrs. Johnston and I looked at each other for a moment. Then I wiped my hands and let her push me toward the living room. Before we even got there, I could hear my dad apologizing from a distance. I am so sorry, he said, his voice more servile than I'd ever heard it. It was a lapse in our etiquette. My other son has trouble with his legs, and I was afraid it might spoil your visit, so I kept him in his room. As I listened, we entered the living room. Just as I was about to say hello, the man sitting in the main armchair looked over at me, his brow slightly furrowed. The moment our eyes met, I froze, because it was Larry Smith, a man I hadn't seen in 3 years. Leo, My dad saw me and hurried over, taking the wheelchair from Mrs. Johnston. "Come and say hello to Mr. Smith." My dad pushed me to the center of the living room, much closer to Larry, but I couldn't get a single word out. It had been 3.5 years since college graduation. In all that time, I never once thought I'd see Larry Smith again. I stared at him in shock, my heart hammering erratically in my chest, my throat feeling like it was clogged with cotton. "Him. I'll take him." Just then, Larry, who was lounging on the sofa, lifted his chin slightly and gestured toward me. The 3 words stunned the entire room into silence. Nearly 2 full minutes passed before my dad finally managed to stammer out a confirmation. "Mr. Smith, are you referring to Leo?" "Yes." Larry's expression didn't change. He was cool and distant, as if we'd never met. "He leaves with me now." He didn't give me a chance to do anything, not even to say goodbye to Mrs. Johnston. Larry's assistant was already pushing me toward the car. He left a room full of people with their jaws on the floor. My only luggage was the wheelchair with its chipped paint. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling a little heavier. Once in the car, Larry sat beside me with his eyes closed, not saying a word. From the house to the car, he hadn't spoken to me at all, hadn't even met my eyes once. I watched the white landscape flash by the window, wondering if Larry had chosen me because of some strange fetish. When we arrived at the Smith residence, the assistant left me on the 2nd floor and departed. The enormous house was eerily silent, as if it were just Larry and me. I thought for a moment, then tried to speak. But once I started, I didn't know what to say. "I have some things to take care of," Larry said, saving me. "You should get some rest." He gestured to a room nearby. "Food will be brought up later." With that, he went downstairs and left. I stared blankly at the vast, empty house. After a moment, I decided to do as he said. Larry didn't return until after dinner. In the meantime, the housekeeper had politely prepared lunch and dinner for me. When he came back, I was in my room, idly flipping through channels with the remote. "Time to get washed up," he said as soon as he walked in. Without waiting for a reply, he started pushing my wheelchair toward the bathroom. "Wait," I said, trying to stop him. "I can do it myself. I just don't have any clean clothes. Could you maybe—" But before I could finish, he had already pushed me into the bathroom. He then knelt in front of me and reached for the buttons on my shirt. No, don't," I said, quickly trying to push his hands away. "That's too much trouble for you. I can do it myself." "Really?" This time, Larry didn't insist. He stopped, but he remained kneeling in front of me, meeting my eyes for the first time all day. He asked me very seriously, "Why not?" Well, I felt a bit awkward. "It would be a lot of trouble for you." "There's no trouble for me, but it's still a little what?" He was stubborn, his eyes fixed on me, as if demanding a clear answer. I paused before continuing. It's not exactly convenient." After I said that, he was silent for a long moment. Larry's dark eyes seemed to look straight into my soul. We held each other's gaze for what felt like an eternity before he finally spoke. "I don't know. Leo," he said, speaking slowly, enunciating every word. 3 years ago, on the day I graduated from college, a guy came up to me, crying, kissed me, and then ran off. I could never find him again. I don't know what he meant by it. For the past 3 years, I've kept wondering, was he into me? Or was it just some kind of graduation prank? Can you tell me? I never expected him to ask that, let alone that he knew it was me that night. We were in different majors and different classes, so we were never close in college, barely more than acquaintances who'd nod in passing. On the night of graduation, I waited for him on the path back from his department dinner, hiding in the dark shadows of the trees. Then I recklessly ran out and kissed him. But it was less of a confession and more of a formal end to my 4-year secret crush. I vaguely remember the sky was a hazy gray that night, with clouds obscuring the pale moon. The shadows of the trees swayed in the dim light. I thought then, with a mix of regret and sadness, that I would surely never see him again. I never imagined fate could be so twisted and complex that we would meet again. Except now that we had, I no longer dared to admit it. "You'd have to ask the person himself," I replied after a moment, my expression neutral. I can't guess what other people are thinking. Larry seemed completely unprepared for that answer. He just stared, looking lost for a good while. Then I thought I saw the light go out of his eyes for a second. You're right. I shouldn't be asking you. With that, he reached out again and started unbuttoning my shirt. You really don't have to. I tried to push him away again. But this time he brushed my hands aside. I brought you here. Helping you bathe. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? His words made my hands freeze in midair. In that brief moment, Larry had my shirt off in a flash. Then he lifted me slightly and pulled my pants down. The bathroom was silent. I instinctively bent over, trying to cover myself. But I saw that Larry's gaze was fixed on the two horrifying scars on my legs. He stayed like that, half kneeling before me, looking at them for a very, very long time. Then he slowly raised his hand and gently traced the ugly, disgusting scars. His touch so light it was as if he were afraid of hurting me. But the truth was, that part of me had stopped hurting long ago. How did this happen? He asked softly, looking up at me. An accident, I said, avoiding his eyes. When? A year ago. A year ago? Yeah. Larry paused, then said, You've been through so much. Hearing those words, I turned my head in surprise. Since the accident, besides Mrs. Johnston, no one had ever said anything like that to me. I stared at him, speechless, until he reached up and gently wiped the corner of my eye. Then, to my astonishment, he leaned in and pressed a kiss to my forehead. Soon, the sound of running water filled the bathroom. The warm water on my skin mingled with the heat from Larry's hands, spreading through me like a gentle current. After the bath, he carried me back to the bedroom, his bedroom. After he washed up himself, he lay down beside me. When I had a crush on Larry, I knew my place. I understood perfectly well that nothing would ever happen between us. But sometimes, in my dreams, I had imagined us sharing a bed. Dreams were just dreams, though. Fragmented pieces that could never form a complete, warm Larry. Now I was lying next to the real him. Even after 3 years, I couldn't suppress that familiar flutter in my chest. Tomorrow we're going to see a doctor, the man beside me said, moving a little closer and taking my hand. I shifted slightly, trying to pull away, but I couldn't. What doctor? A specialist I've flown in from Germany. We're going to take another look at your legs. See if there are any viable treatment options. His words sent a thrill of hope through me. In the year I'd spent in this wheelchair, I had never stopped dreaming of being able to stand again. But the more I hoped, the more I was disappointed. Don't be afraid. Larry seemed to sense what I was thinking and squeezed my hand a little tighter. I won't let you down, he said with conviction. I couldn't help but turn my head. He was looking at me with intense focus. When I woke up the next day, there was a brand new wheelchair by the bed. It was exquisitely made and looked incredibly expensive. I was speechless, wondering when he had prepared it. Larry didn't explain. He just lifted me carefully and placed me in it. The wheelchair was comfortable, so perfect it felt like it had been custom made for me. And just like that, more than a year after my accident, I was finally out of the second-hand wheelchair my dad had bought for me. I had a new one that wouldn't chip or get stuck. Larry pushed me in that chair to the hospital. We sat in a large consultation room, watching several doctors in front of us discuss my case in Low German for a long time. I couldn't understand them, but I could clearly see the serious expressions on their faces. Time ticked by. With every second that passed, the little flicker of hope I'd felt began to fade. Don't be afraid, Larry said suddenly, leaning closer and taking my hand again. I told you I won't let you down. I managed a weak nod. It's possible, one of the doctors finally said after another long pause, his English heavily accented. I didn't hear anything else after that. I just sat there numbly, watching Larry discuss the details with them, seeing them glance at me from time to time. The only words echoing in my mind were "it's possible." They were deafening. According to their final discussion, the actual treatment would begin after the new year in about 2 months. For those 2 months, Larry told me to rest and build up my strength. You know, he said the next morning, pausing with one arm in his suit jacket. He turned to me, still in bed. Why don't you come to the office with me? What? No, I don't think so. Larry looked like he wanted to say something else but stopped himself. I think I understood what he was worried about, so I explained, "Don't worry. I've made it through the last year. I'm not going to do anything stupid." Hearing that, his face darkened for a moment, and he looked frustrated. "Well, if you need anything, make sure you call me." I nodded, watching him finish getting dressed. I suddenly felt like I'd seen this exact scene in a dream once. For the next week, I stayed home by myself. The housekeeper and butler were very polite, always asking what I wanted to eat before preparing my 3 daily meals. Before I knew it, it was the winter solstice. It started snowing before dawn. In the afternoon, while I was home alone, idly flipping through a book, my phone rang. It was Larry. "Are you busy?" "No." "Could you go into the closet, find a suit for me, and have it brought over?" I immediately put the book down. "Okay. What kind?" "Anything, really. Just something formal. I'll have the driver come pick you up." After hanging up, I spent a while in his massive walk-in closet before having the housekeeper help me get a suit down. As the car drove, the green belts along the road were already covered in a blanket of white. When we got to the Smith Group building, I called Larry to ask him to send his assistant down for the suit. "Just come up," he said instead. "Come straight up." Before I could say anything, he sounded busy and hung up. With no other choice, I held the garment bag in my lap and had the driver push me upstairs. In the elevator, I kept wondering what to say to the receptionist, but when the doors opened, Larry was already waiting right there. He smoothly took over the wheelchair from the driver and pushed me inside. I'd worked for a couple of years after college, but only in small studios. This was my first time in a major corporation like this. I expected the atmosphere to be tense, but it was lively and buzzing. The employees all looked excited. It's the winter solstice, so the cafeteria is making dumplings and lamb soup. "You should have some with us later." My first instinct was to refuse. I didn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble or gossip for him. "It's fine," he insisted. "Eat with us. The company chefs are pretty good." I couldn't refuse again, so I waited in his office for a while before he pushed me to the cafeteria. The cafeteria was crowded. When Larry walked in, everyone greeted him, and he replied to each of them. "Mr. Smith." A cheerful guy, the type who was always the class clown, called out loudly, "We've been dying to ask. Who's this you've got with you?" Once someone started, the dam of curiosity broke. Everyone, who had been holding back out of respect for his position as CEO, started chiming in, asking who I was. Since he had to push me, Larry was always standing behind me. I couldn't see his expression, but when he spoke, I could hear the smile in his voice. "He's the one I'm trying to win over." His words sent a wave of gasps through the cafeteria. I turned my head to look at him, stunned. He was looking down at me, his gaze incredibly gentle. Well, a voice said as someone walked in from the entrance, coming straight to my side. "If it isn't Leo." I looked up and saw Chris, Larry's best friend from college. "Hi," I said quickly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Chris grinned. "You might not have expected it, but I knew I'd be seeing you again." I didn't understand what he meant. Come on. Without any ceremony, he squeezed past Larry and started pushing my wheelchair. "Sit at my table," he said as we went. "Are you having the lamb soup or the dumplings? Old Smith is such a jerk, finding you and not even telling me." He kept chattering on, but my mind was stuck on that one phrase. Finding you. We went home together that night. It wasn't until the car stopped in the driveway that I realized Larry hadn't changed into the suit I'd brought him. Why didn't you change into the clothes I brought?" The driver had already gotten out, leaving just the two of us in the car. "It was a trick. I just wanted you to come to the office," he said bluntly. "Why?" Larry looked at me for a moment before answering. "Leo, what I said in the cafeteria, I meant it." "What?" "When I said you're the one I'm trying to win over. I was being serious." Boom. As he spoke, it felt like thousands of tiny bubbles were exploding all at once inside my chest. "You don't want to admit you were the one that night," he continued on his own. "Maybe it's because you don't like me anymore. Or maybe it's for some other reason. It doesn't matter. From now on, I'm going to pursue you. I just hope you won't deny me even that chance." The car was silent for a long time after he finished. In college, Larry was the campus heartthrob. His name was always on the school's confessions page, and his photo was a permanent fixture on the honor roll. He was brilliant, handsome, and well-mannered. Even though he was cool and reserved, the line of people wanting to confess to him could have stretched from the campus gates to downtown. I never imagined that one day he would say something like this to me, especially not now when I was a cripple who couldn't even stand up. I turned my face away, not daring to speak. Before I knew it, the end of the year was here. His company started their holiday break early. A week before Christmas, Larry no longer had to go into the office. We spent a few days at home together. On Christmas Eve, Chris called him, asking him to come out for drinks. "Bring Leo with you," Chris said when Larry tried to refuse. "We were all hoping you'd bring him out. What's the fun in being cooped up in the house all day?" After hanging up, Larry tentatively asked if I wanted to go out. I actually had something I wanted to ask Chris, so I agreed. When we arrived, the room was already full of people. Other than Chris, I didn't know anyone. They all greeted me warmly when we came in. I guess birds of a feather flock together. Larry's friends were all polite and very kind to me. After chatting for a while, one of his friends asked him to play a game of pool. "Go ahead," I said, seeing him hesitate. "I'll just stay here and have something to eat." After he left, I waited a bit before moving closer to Chris and asking in a low voice, "Do you have a minute?" "Of course." He had a mischievous grin, as if he'd been expecting it. "You needed something, right?" I nodded honestly. "That day, why did you say that?" "Say what?" About knowing you'd see me again. And about Larry finding me." Chris didn't answer right away. He took a sip of his drink first. "I can't say too much. I think you should get that answer from Larry himself. But there is one thing I want to tell you. For the past 3 years, he's been looking for you." "Looking for me?" I was shocked. "Why?" He smiled again. "Like I said, that's something you have to ask him." With that, he turned his head to look toward Larry. I followed his gaze and saw Larry. He'd taken off his jacket and was wearing just a dress shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He was bent over the table, concentrating on a shot, but he must have felt my stare. He looked up at me and gave me a gentle smile. Soon, it was time for me to leave for Germany. Originally, Larry was going to go with me, but after a week there, urgent business piled up at the company, and he had to rush back to deal with it. He arranged for top-tier nursing care for me and made sure everything was perfectly set up. The doctors said the treatment would take 2 months. If it was successful, the physical therapy afterward would take another 2 months. Larry called or video chatted with me every day. At first, I told him he didn't have to, but he just said, "Can't be lazy when I'm trying to win someone over." I didn't know how to respond, so I just let him. But he wasn't really that free. A lot of the time, our video calls were just a few sentences before he had to hurry back to work. One afternoon, as I was resting in bed after a treatment session, my phone suddenly rang. It was Larry. I was surprised, since it was the middle of the night back home. "What's wrong?" I asked when I answered, but the other end was silent except for some rustling sounds. I thought he must have rolled over on his phone in his sleep and was about to hang up when his voice came through. "Leo, I feel awful." His voice was low and hoarse. "What happened?" I asked immediately. The line went quiet again for a long moment, followed by a soft, strained gasp. I was startled, and as I was debating whether to hang up, he said, "I was drugged." My heart clenched. Forgetting any awkwardness, I quickly asked him what happened. He didn't go into detail, just told me he'd already called a doctor. "But it still hurts," he said through gritted teeth, his voice so raspy he could barely speak. "What can I do?" He hesitated. "Leo." "Yeah." "Can I think about you?" I froze for a second, understanding what he meant. "Yes," I said softly. I stayed on the phone with Larry for 2 hours that day. The second time he came to Germany was a week after that night. When he walked in, we were both silent for a good 5 minutes. He sat by the bed, peeling an apple for me, while I pretended to flip through a book. "Here," he said, holding out the apple. I reached for it, but he grabbed my hand and pulled me into his arms. A week should have been enough time for the drug to completely leave his system. But right now, Larry's voice sounded just as strained as it had that night. "Whatever your reason is for not admitting it," he said, holding me tight, "I'm willing to wait." And whether your legs can be fixed or not, Leo, I don't care. He finished by placing a restrained, gentle kiss on my ear. Larry left again. My treatment entered its most difficult phase. The hours I spent in the treatment room each day were more agonizing than being skinned alive. And when I returned to my hospital bed, that sharp agony transformed into a long, slow gnawing, like ants chewing on my bones. I often tossed and turned in bed, miserable. One night, the pain and itching were so bad I was nearly delirious. I couldn't stop myself from calling Larry. The moment I heard his voice, I broke down, pathetically. Larry. I must have been truly out of my mind, because it was the first time I'd ever said his name. My dad bullies me. I don't know why those words suddenly came out. But as I lay there, feeling like my soul was leaving my body from the pain, my mind drifted back to the accident a year ago. If my dad hadn't been so busy appeasing my stepmother, if he hadn't delayed my treatment, maybe I wouldn't have spent a year in a wheelchair, and I wouldn't be suffering so much now. I thought about how, ever since my mom died, they were the real family. Everyone bullied me because I didn't have a mother to protect me. I'll beat him up for you. I'll get revenge for you, Larry said, comforting me gently over the phone. But his words just made me feel worse. My life had been gray and dull since my mom died, and after the accident, it had become even darker. And then, in the middle of all that darkness, Larry reappeared. But his return didn't bring me joy. All I felt was endless bitterness, shame, and confusion. Do you really? I couldn't help it. With a sliver of hope, I finally asked the question I'd been holding in for so long. Not care at all that I'm a cripple? Of course I don't, Larry answered without a hint of hesitation. Leo, I don't care one bit how different you are now from before. Larry, Chris said you were looking for me. But 3 years ago, you didn't even know me. Why would you look for me? Was it just because I ran up and kissed you? The other end of the line was silent for a moment. Then he said, sounding a little exasperated, why would you think I didn't know you? Leo, if you hadn't run up and ruined my plan that night, I was actually on my way to find you. To find me for what? To ask you. His voice seemed to get closer to the receiver. If you wanted to be with me. I listened, stunned. For a long time, there was only silence in my ears. Get some sleep first, he said. When you wake up, I'll tell you everything. I didn't refuse, and I didn't ask any more questions. Because in that moment, I realized the pain was completely gone, and a wave of sleepiness finally washed over me. The next day, as I went through my treatment, I kept guessing what Larry was going to tell me. For the first time, the hours of therapy didn't seem so unbearable. After my session, the nurse pushed me back to my room. When the door opened, I saw Larry sitting inside. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you? He said, coming over to take my hand. That when you woke up, I'd come and tell you everything. Larry held me as we lay on the bed, and he told me a long, long story. He told me about a person he'd had a secret crush on in college. This person was brilliant but quiet, always by himself, and seemed so lonely. He talked for a very long time, telling me how he had fallen for that person. As night fell, he said with deep regret, I really regret it. I thought that if I took care of everything first before confessing to you, it would be the responsible thing to do, that it would show you how sincere I was. But it wasn't until the moment you kissed me that I realized you liked me too. And it was only when I couldn't find you anywhere that I understood none of those plans and arrangements really mattered. I listened in a daze. Every word went into my ears, but I couldn't let them into my heart. It was all too beautiful to be real. In the 4 years I'd crushed on Larry, I never allowed myself to fantasize. Even during the hardest time after my accident, I only used old memories to sustain myself, never daring to hope for anything. And now he was telling me he'd liked me all along. I looked up at him. I never imagined this day would come. Larry gently stroked my forehead. Every word is true. That's why, when you wouldn't acknowledge me, I was so hurt. I thought you didn't like me anymore. Back then, I really felt, it wasn't that I didn't like him. It was that I didn't dare to like him anymore. I looked down. In my condition, how could I possibly admit it? I was already useless. I am MPH. Before I could finish, I felt my chin being lifted. Then, a kiss pressed against my lips. It was scorching, urgent, and a little frantic. Leo. He pulled back slightly, his lips still brushing against mine. I don't care. Whether you can be cured or not, I don't care. I knew Larry wouldn't lie. But lying here now, my legs still felt alien, beyond my control. I was still like a reindeer dragging a broken leg across a barren wasteland. Useless, except for feeling sorry for myself. Seeing that I didn't respond, Larry took a deep breath, then slipped under the covers. Don't, I said in a panic, trying to stop him. Please don't. But he was just as stubborn as the first day we were reunited, giving me no room to resist. A kiss landed softly on the scars on my legs. Then it slowly moved upward, as if he were leaving love-filled kisses on every inch of my skin. I gripped his arm, but in the end, I was powerless to fight back and surrendered completely. Then he climbed back up, pulled me into his arms again, and stroked me tenderly. Leo, as long as you're willing, that's all that matters. As long as you're willing. Larry stayed in Germany for 2 weeks this time. Those 2 weeks were the most critical and the most difficult part of the treatment. Whether I could be cured or not depended almost entirely on that fortnight. I often felt anxious, terrified, and hopeless. But having him with me made the days a little more bearable. 2 weeks later, for the first time in over a year, I slowly stood up. I could only stand for a second or two since I hadn't started rehab yet. But I was ecstatic. That day, I hugged Larry and, for the first time in front of him, I cried my heart out. After that came the rehabilitation process, not long but not short either. It wasn't as agonizing as the treatment, but it required much more persistence and willpower. Larry had offered to do video calls to keep me company during my rehab sessions, but I refused. I knew his job was demanding, and with the time difference, it wouldn't be convenient. During those 2 months, I watched the flowers bloom all over Berlin from my window. I didn't tell Larry the day I was flying back. The original plan was to return in June, but the doctor said my recovery was going so well that I could leave a bit early. When I first moved into Larry's house, he hadn't let me bring anything with me. After landing in San Francisco, I planned to go home first, pack up my things, and then take them to Larry's place. As soon as I walked in the door, I saw Mark and my dad sitting in the living room, talking. Larry must have told them about my progress, because they didn't seem surprised to see me walking. But as I started to go upstairs, Mark couldn't resist a snide comment. Well, look at you. Guess you're luckier than you deserve. I ignored him and kept walking. Seeing that I didn't care made him even angrier. You think that Larry Smith is some kind of saint? That night, if his driver hadn't shown up so fast, I would be the one living in the Smith mansion right now. My foot, already on the next step, froze. What did you say? I said, that night I almost had him. So don't you go thinking he's some great guy. Before he could finish, I swung my fist and punched him. So that's what happened. After that night, I had occasionally wondered how someone like Larry could have been drugged. He must have let his guard down because Mark and I were technically related. How could you hit your brother? My dad roared, instantly furious. He always looked the other way when Hannah and Mark bullied me. He never said a word when my stepmother mistreated me. But now I'd barely landed one punch on Mark, and he was livid. Don't you even think about trying anything with him, I said, looking at Mark. I had loved Larry for so many years I couldn't stand to see someone use such dirty tricks on him. And you, I said, turning to my dad, don't you yell at me right now. After all, your business is only afloat because of Larry's goodwill. Instead of worrying about Mark, you should be a lot more worried about whether I can, and whether I'm willing to, keep him happy. Because if one day I'm not, I highly doubt Larry will be willing to take any of your other children off your hands. My father's face turned beet red, but he couldn't say a single word. It was late by the time I got back to Larry's house. The lights were already off. I washed up quietly downstairs, then tiptoed into the bedroom. Using the faint light from outside, I made my way to the bed, took off my clothes, and slipped under the covers. The movement startled Larry awake. He instinctively started to push me away, but when he saw it was me, he froze. As he stared, stunned, I rolled over and straddled him. Larry, I whispered, leaning close. Yeah. Do you want to sleep with me? The man beneath me hitched his breath, his body reacting instinctively. Realizing what he'd done, he looked utterly mortified. But I thought this version of Larry was adorable. I smiled and leaned closer, whispering 3 words in his ear. The second he heard them, he flipped me over and pinned me beneath him. The early summer breeze was cool that night. I love you so much, I sobbed, over and over, finally saying the words out loud. My degree is in design. After a month of rest, I went back to work at my old mentor's studio, which was close to Larry's company. At noon, he would send his driver to pick me up and take me to his office for lunch. After we ate, he would hold me for a nap in the small lounge behind his desk. At Thanksgiving, he took me home to meet his family. He told me he'd already taken care of everything at home, but I was still surprised by how well they treated me. For someone from Larry's background, I can't imagine how much effort it must have taken to convince his family, and how much more thought he must have put in to make sure they treated me just like any other normal daughter-in-law. That night, we stayed over. While he was in the shower, I casually browsed the books on his shelf. As I was flipping through one, I found a photograph tucked inside. I picked it up. It was a picture of me in the library during our sophomore year, sketching a design. That was the day I knew for sure that I liked you, Larry said. He had come in without me noticing. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, nuzzling me gently. I just kept thinking, if only you liked me too. I turned and hugged him back. You have no idea, I said. I knew you were sitting behind me back then. I was so nervous I could barely breathe. Larry laughed at that, then let out a long, contented sigh. I think I understood why. Our journey had been too full of twists and turns. But what's past is past, and the future is still ours to make. The lucky thing is we only wasted 6 years, and we still have 60 more to love each other.